So I just started testing out the Dell XPS 14 and man, is this an impressive laptop. I've been dying to test a Windows laptop and have it replace my MacBook as a daily driver for programming, and this machine is probably the closest I'll ever get. The screen is a 14-inch 120Hz OLED, so it looks amazing, but to me that's not even the best part. This trackpad is single-handedly the best I've seen from a Windows laptop, as it replicates the feel of a MacBook so well. You can properly drag with 2 fingers, get haptic feedback while pressing, and move around windows comfortably. The build quality isn't quite at the level of a Mac, but everything else about this machine feels premium. Because of that, I decided I was going to turn this into the ultimate Windows programming machine, and so in this video, I'll be sharing my personal setup for development that helps to make the coding experience on here a lot better. To start, go into settings and updates and ensure that you've installed all of the latest Windows updates. This will ensure that your machine has the most up-to-date Windows version and will be as secure as possible before you continue setup. After that, I had to add or remove programs and delete practically everything that isn't necessary. If you're able to delete an app, it's probably safe to do so, and this significantly helps to reduce the bloat that you find on Windows machines by default. Unless you like McAfee, I would delete it as the built-in Windows antivirus is more than enough. Just make sure to run a scan before doing anything else, just to be safe. Next, I head into startup apps and turn off most everything because I don't want every single app on my laptop opening at the same time, because it makes that initial experience feel so slow. At the very minimum, you'll want to disable high impact applications that you don't use. I also disable almost all notifications as I don't really care about any of them, and open the drop down for additional settings and disable show the Windows welcome experience, suggest ways to get the most out of Windows, and get tips and suggestions when using Windows. Once that's done, I make a couple of changes so that I get the most performance out of this machine at all times. To start, open up Control Panel and then select one of the 2 View by Icons options. Within here, there's an option for power settings. Hit that, and then you'll see the selected plan is balanced. By default, this is the only option available, and you can stick with it, but I'd rather sacrifice some battery life and take full advantage of my laptop's power. To do this, you have to run 2 powercfg commands in the terminal, which I'll drop in the description so you don't have to type them. After you paste both of those, the high performance plan should be available and selected. Once that's done, I select change plan settings and set the computer to never shut down when plugged in, but this is really personal preference. Saving that, if you work on an external monitor, you might want to select choose what closing the lid does and set the computer not to go to sleep when closed. Now, out of the box, Windows 11 has a lot of fancy effects that do look good, but if you're just looking to have a powerful machine, you might want to open up advanced system settings and then select adjust for best performance rather than let Windows choose what's best. Alternatively, you can just select different styles individually in case there's a couple you want. If you want to squeeze even more juice out of the machine, you can disable transparency effects within accessibility and visual effects settings. Once that's done, I go to clean up my desktop as I find it's easiest to get work done when I keep my laptop completely clean. I remove any shortcut that's on the desktop and then go into settings, personalization, and related settings where I uncheck show the recycle bin. This way there's literally nothing on the desktop and it looks super clean. Additionally, I like to hide my taskbar and throw it on the right side, but Windows 11 makes this almost impossible. I had to download a third-party app called Start All Back, which gives you a ton of customization with Windows and allows you to configure your start menu, taskbar, tray icons, file explorer, and more. You can change the Windows 11 styling back to 10, 8, or 7, but what I use it for is slimming down my start menu and throwing the taskbar onto the side. There's then one last app I download to complete the initial Windows setup before I can get into programming. This is Flow Launcher, which is essentially a Raycast-like application launcher for Windows. Using Alt and space, it pulls up a nice dialog menu where you can search any app on your machine and launch it directly from there. It's nowhere near as powerful as Raycast, there's no extensions, and it can't access system commands, but for the simple use case of launching applications more quickly, it works great. So to begin the programming setup, I first run PowerShell as an administrator, and then change the execution policy because sometimes Windows won't let you run certain scripts. All I do is type set-execution policy unrestricted, hit enter, and then Y to accept those changes. Afterwards, I open up Windows Terminal and keep that pinned to my taskbar sidebar for quick access. Windows Terminal is actually not a bad experience to use, but I'm really excited for Warp to drop on here as I've loved using it on my Mac. Hopping into the terminal though, in my documents folder, I like to create a dev directory with mkdir-dev, and this is where I store any project I create or clone on my machine. This keeps everything in one place and it's a simple setup. Though this isn't actually where I code most of my projects from, because I decided with this laptop to finally try out WSL, and I can't believe I didn't do this sooner. This lets you run essentially a Linux machine within Windows so that you can work in a proper Unix shell, which coming from Mac is nice to have. Installing this is actually super easy. You just have to first go into Windows settings and search turn Windows features on or off. In this menu, you'll want to ensure you have both virtual machine platform and Windows hypervisor platform turned on, and then you're ready to install WSL. Head into the terminal and then type wsl-install, which will automatically install Ubuntu as the default distro. After this finishes, you want to reboot and then you're good to go. When you open terminal back up and click on the down chevron, you'll have Ubuntu as a terminal drop-down item. This allows you to interact with your Linux machine and download packages, work on projects, etc. The first thing I do again is in my home directory, create that dev folder, and this is where I really want to store all of my projects. The really cool thing about WSL is even if you run a Next.js project, for example, it still has access to localhost and will function as normal. Before I can write any code though, I download curl first using sudo apt update to ensure I have the latest version available, and then run sudo apt install curl. It's good practice to run curl -- version just to make sure it downloaded properly. After this, I download Homebrew, which is a package manager that you can download by going to brew.sh in your browser and copying their curl command. I work with Next.js and Nest.js for all of my projects, so I download NVM or Node Version Manager through Brew, as this lets me easily keep Node up to date and switch between versions if necessary. I also download Git through Brew as my version control system. By default, Ubuntu uses Bash as its shell, or at least that's what mine was set at. You can check this by typing echo $shell. I like to use Zish with omyzish so that I can have a similar dev environment to my Mac. So to switch from Bash to Zish, I type chsh-s/user bin zish. After doing this, just open a new terminal window and then echo $shell again to check it worked. To customize Zish, I use omyzish, which if you go to omyz.sh, you can download it with their curl command. Now, what I do next is in my home directory, clone my git.files repo that has both my zishrc file and git config file. All the git config does is set my name and email, as well as make main my default branch. Then in my zishrc file, I configure my omyzish theme along with the git plugin, which lets you see your current branch in the terminal. I also create a few aliases for git, pnpm, and other terminal commands so that I can perform actions quicker. In this repo, I also have a config sh bash script, which when ran will read both of the config files and copy all of their changes to my machine. After running source ~/.zishrc, the shell is updated and I'm ready to go. With Zish configured, I then downloaded a new browser, which is in my case Arc. I've been using Arc on Mac for like 6 months now and have fallen in love with it, so I'm really glad it's now available on Windows. It's not exactly the same experience, there's a couple features missing, but it has the sidebar and spaces, which is what I like most about Arc. It runs Chromium under the hood, so all of your current extensions will work without issue. Next, I download my code editor of choice, which is now Cursor. This is basically just a fork of VS Code with some added AI functionality using Claude by default, and I found that it's much more useful than Copilot. It's being hyped up a lot on Twitter right now, and for good reason, as it has full context of your code base and is able to much better, in my opinion, help you refactor code and write simple functions. Because it is a VS Code fork, all VS Code extensions will work without issue, and they're keeping it up to date with all the latest releases. If you're interested in my VS Code setup, like my theme, extensions, etc., I have a link in the description where I've documented all of this. One extension that you'll definitely want if using WSL is the WSL extension, which lets you open any folder in WSL within Cursor. So all of these apps and settings have helped me to create a better Windows development setup that I enjoy working on. To be a great developer though, you need to always be learning, and that's where today's sponsor Brilliant comes in. Brilliant has a ton of hands-on programming courses where you learn by doing. Their Programming with Python course gets you building programs from day one using a built-in editor. You learn all of this not by memorizing, but working hands-on, which is far more effective than lecture lecture style videos. To try everything Brilliant has to offer completely free for 30 days, visit brilliant.org/colcacmus or click the first link in the description. You'll also get 20% off the annual premium subscription when you sign up. That though has been my Windows development setup. I'm definitely still a Mac guy, but I've wanted to try a Windows laptop for quite some time, and I think the XPS does a great job. I'm going to continue to use this and make a review at some point, so stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed this video, you'll want to watch this one next, where I talk about some more tools for development that I can't live without. Thanks for watching, and take care.